Are you ready to join me in transforming fear to freedom? That's the objective of the show. Are you ready to explore with me and my guests? Are you ready to get into the deep and play? This is where it's at, and that's what it's all about. No medical advice here. Use discernment and decide for yourself if the information is right for you.
Welcome back to Let's Get Real, chatting with Catherine and our regular series, Go Deep or Go Home, with Debbie Colleen. And Debbie Colleen and I always play in the deep, so we just decided to call it such. And tonight is going to be no different, and we are going to be exploring conscious creation. And we're going to be talking about affirmations, co-creation, curiosity. And some of those things they seem so obvious, and some of them are so interesting to explore into, and that's the reason why we're having this conversation. A lot of people talk about affirmations today, and I would love to explore with Debbie and find out, how they work, what's the point of them. Some people are just saying words and they don't have any real meaning for them, and they don't really understand them. They're hearing about it. Affirmations is a word that's used a lot these days, so we're going to get into that. And what's this talk about co-creation? It's another area that is so interesting, and it takes us to a different kind of looking at our lives. The concept of co-creation is so complex and deep, and I think it's going to be fun.
Welcome back, and this is the second part of our conversation on conscious creation with Debbie Colleen, and we're going to get right into it, starting where we left off. And that is all about affirmations and so forth and creating our own reality. So let's get to it with Debbie Colleen right now.
We can create within our culture in a physical way for people to be safe and for people to have, the life of their dreams. Recognizing that everybody's dream is different.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I remember actually many years ago, I think it was Esther Hicks with Abraham, and they said, we're so free that we can choose bondage. And we're so free, we have such a free will planet, we could choose slavery if we wish. Yeah. And so when we are talking about conscious creation, and we look at all the changes that are happening right now, and we are in a time of actually quite a bit of turmoil on the planet. And it's interesting because, I would think that I wasn't alive during World War II, but I would think that during that time there was quite a bit of conflict. But this is a different kind of conflict. And some of it is physical, some of it is actual war, and some of it is just struggling with much deeper questions, much more than just do we want to continue to wage war. But there's more than that. We're going much deeper because we're looking at it in terms of there's a lot of people who are aware of what have we created as far as our food supply, what have we created as far as environmental, how we've been treating the earth. That to me is a change in consciousness, and actually that is not only personal but collective too, because more people are aware. Before, people, when they first got the automobile, they started driving it, there wasn't a lot of talk about, I wonder what this is going to do to our environment. It was like,
I think that we're going to keep coming upon those things because, the very a very advanced truth for me is that we're going to very rapidly advance ourselves into a time when, the idea of driving an automobile will be kind of ludicrous because people can bilocate. They can move, using their mind recognizing that the body is merely elements and, bits and pieces kind of lightly strung together. And we have the power to disassemble that with our mind and then put it together in another place.
Are you talking about in our lifetimes? Are you talking about?
I don't think I'm talking about in our lifetimes. I don't know. Well, you know what, Catherine? I am pretty darn sure there's people doing this already.
Yeah, I was going to say, we often hear about this story about Saint Germain, who lived for, and there's been other people who have supposedly lived for enormous amounts of time, like way beyond I think I heard about somebody who was like 5,000 years old.
Yep. Yeah,
and
I've heard about those people too.
So,
and we tend to disbelieve them because, it's kind of, it's easy to be gullible and imagine that things like that could be true. And personally, I just kind of put myself in a space of, oh, well, maybe, rather than disputing whether it can be, because I do believe that we've come from times when we could do things with our mind. There are beings from other realms who do it, that's what the whole space travel thing is kind of about, is, disassembling the molecules of physical objects and reassembling them some way in some other place. I mean, we see it on Star Trek all the time, we're able to imagine it. And the truth, and this is the truth about creation, if we can imagine it, at some point it's going to come true.
Mm-hmm.
If it's what we want, it's...
Mm-hmm.
So
it's possible. If the mind can conceive it, I've heard that many times, and I think that was, it's become sort of more understood that, if you can imagine it, then you can make it. It can be so. It's possible. Yeah. So it's not outside of normal. I mean, look at when you think of Star Trek, somebody was imagining lasers, and now we're using lasers in all kinds of things, surgery and space, but also in just day to day, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and religions have these stories all the time, and in our modern lack of gullibility, we can dismiss them or believe them as myth. Whatever, it doesn't matter. The thing is, for me, is that we're going somewhere. And I know pretty well, as much as I know anything, that at some point we're going to have these psychic abilities that, some people claim to have now, and as far as I'm concerned, they probably do. And why not? Because we're actually not the body. As soon as we can get it into our collective imagination that we're not this body, that's the number one stumbling block that we have, is that we've been brought up through 2,000 to however many thousand years of seeing concreteness, seeing, solid state Newtonian physics as being the only parameters, believing our eyes.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's. I mean, I'm not expecting anyone listening to this show to absolutely take anything we're saying verbatim or that it's fact, because it isn't. That's the whole point of it. It's exploration. That's what we're doing tonight. It's exploration.
So
and
that's how we explore. That's how we create, is to explore possibilities. And my belief is what we'll get to in a time when we're no longer afraid of all the things around us, and we have returned to an understanding of our spiritual nature and our divinity. We are going to treat these lifetimes with great respect as lifetimes to be researchers, investigators, adventurers, journeyers, and have a lot more fun.
We must have known this at the collective level at some point, because how many times have you heard over the years and even in history when someone said, do not speak of it? You'd say something and they'd be so afraid of it being real. Don't say it.
Like the very fear of it is proof that it's there.
It's possible. If you say it out loud, it'll be true. And I always thought that was a folklore or a wives' tale or and now I'm really getting it in this moment. I'm getting it. that's why they did that, because they knew it was that powerful.
Mm-hmm. The power of the word is very, very immense. It's a vibration, and vibration creates. And I'm not a scientist, as I've said many times, but I do know that vibration has a very powerful effect on everything. That's how everything actually exists, is a vibration, a wavelength, a movement, whether it's sound or sight or taste, everything is a vibration.
Yes, and we knew
Color
that. This is what
vibration.
gets me. We knew this. We did know it. No, this is why I'm so excited, because it's like, why some of the things we've said or heard said or, talked about over the years and old stories and whatever, there was truth in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that has, that it's so hard to be in absolutes. I mean, you and I were just talking about that. There's really not a lot of absolutes that surround us, because what we have, the way that we live, we are very surrounded by immense potential and possibility, that there's so much room for way more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as we get away from those ends of the spectrum that are, where we put a lot of energy in either following, getting along, being like everyone else, or the other end, rebelling, opposing, fighting, arguing. And when we can find our own place in our own location and set out from that, it would be a really magical time and place for us.
It will, but, this leads me into one of the parts of this conversation that we intended to discuss, and that's affirmations. So you're talking about the power of the word.
Yeah.
What, we hear a lot about it, Debbie, and I'd love for you to share what your thoughts are on what affirmations are. I mean, we've done some chats about affirmations, but I'd love to hear it in this context. Why do it?
I'd like to just start a little further back before affirmations, because that's a kind of very advanced kind of creative energy. But as we get to know ourselves better, we come upon what we value. And some values, are pretty much, this is the place where people can agree most of all, I think, is that, we have values that are fairly congruent. They can be, okay? What part of things we put the most value on, that's more personal, individual, but, we value peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as we move into this new realm, this new, the possibilities of this new world that are just barely becoming open for us to explore, we're going to be fairly quickly move to a place where anything other than being in peace is just a waste of time.
Yeah.
Peace is not that hard to find. It doesn't mean that we have to make peace for everybody. It's just when we find it for ourselves. Where's the energy of the energy of I'm not against you, even if I'm not absolutely getting you.
Mm-hmm.
Peace. Peace is somehow hard to define, but it's not very hard to understand. We all know the feeling of it. So peace is a place where we could say we're in alignment. And that is when we kind of have a meet-up. When we start to learn where our peace is, we start to kind of get a sense of what our values are. And I think this is different for every person, perhaps, but when we start looking at what do we really value, we can see how those values give meaning to our thoughts. And our thoughts, come and go like the wind. We have thoughts all the time. Our brain is a kinetic thinking machine. It always is thinking. But we have reactions to our thoughts, which cause feelings. All right, so if we have a thought about something that we have a fear about, like if we've been bitten by a dog or spooked by a cat or been frightened by someone in a red hat, we can have a thought about a cat, a dog, a red hat, and have a feeling of fear.
Right.
And that fear causes a cascade of chemical reactions in our body. And those chemical reactions can be very unpleasant or they can be very pleasant because that's how our bodies are set up to move us, to use emotion to move us towards more pleasurable and away from painful. That's basically how we keep ourselves safe.
Right.
And happy. So starting from the places of getting to know ourselves, this is a conscious recognition of what we value. And it doesn't have to be a huge mission statement or a value statement of our life, but, just the small things that we value in our life or the big overriding principles that we value. And then from that place of knowing what we value and then the thoughts that come and go, the feelings that react from them, then we have, ideas that come and go as well. So there's this interaction, thoughts and ideas coming, from us, from other people. And we're always cutting out things and adding things in. But we are also always having these emotional responses to that.
Right.
And at some point, we have to look at our emotional responses to things and heal the things that are unnecessary fears. Because that's a part of conscious creation that's really important. Because this is what ties into our subconscious, is when we have these fears, we're always moving away from fearful, painful things and towards pleasurable, enjoyable things. That's our basic physical makeup. And we're here with these bodies to make use of that. But if we have irrational fears and fears that keep us from enjoying our life, and most of the time what gets in the way of our conscious creation is these irrational, subconsciously, or these fears that set off our subconscious avoidance and reactions towards things. This is the thing that, this is where we are kind of exploring as we move in the 20th century that had a big exploration of psychology.
So if we were having just for an example, if I had a subconscious fear of, let's say, being in a crowd, then I might deny myself the joy of going to a public performance of something I really love. So exactly. I might, those kinds of, or whatever. It might be something and you don't know why. I never do that. I never explore outside, or I don't do whatever. And those are the kinds of fears you're talking about that if we choose to, we can heal them because, there's a healthy fear of, say fire, you don't want to stand in it, etc. But a fear like where you can't socialize or you don't want to go and look for a job that you really want, but you're terrified of the interview being judged, so you can't do an interview or whatever it might be. Those are the kinds of fears that prevent you from really manifesting the life you want and living like you say. Okay.
That's exactly it. And those are the things that stand in the way of our conscious creation the most strongly. However, we can't just willy-nilly go into them because those are in our subconscious and we can't actually find them through our conscious understanding. And yet it's our conscious that we're working with when we're talking about conscious creation. So what can we do? We can look at our behaviors. We can learn more, and this is something that happens over time. Also, it's something that our unseen friends and our connection with divinity is always working with us to heal. That's the most important parts of our work with divinity at this time of the planet, as far as I can see, is getting past our unconscious, irrational fears And of course, included in that is our opinions and our judgments, because so much of our opinions and judgments are based on those irrational, subconscious treatment of our fears. We tend to shy away from anything, avoiding the pain of our fear.
Right.
That is going to make us uncomfortable that way. Although some people are kind of, wired up the other way, where they actually seek out pain, and that's a whole other discussion. But, it can show up in all different ways, and why is that? Because we're exploring it all.
But sometimes
it's not matter that those fears are terrible things. It's just that we're exploring our way out of them now.
But also not to go too dark here, but there are times then, because fear and anger are aggression can be, sometimes we retreat, but sometimes we become very aggressive. Like, I equate it to like a dog. You see a dog who is a fear biter. They bite before you hurt them, because that's how they see you. And I think sometimes when people have a fear of something, they attack, because so the behaviors, and then, you can
fight, flight, or freeze.
But then, you see that in sometimes in children who can't seem to get along at school, and you don't know why, and they seem to be always getting into a fight or always being the aggressor. So, and they're creating a reality for themselves that can be, it seems like, well, gee, they're such a nice kid, and then, they're always getting into these troubles. Well, perhaps it's a fear that's, so rather than, like you say,
I'd say more than perhaps. I'd say it is fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and I think that point you made, creating a reality, this is where we change from being an unconscious creator of a reality into a conscious creator of a reality, because that's exactly what I'm talking kind of around here, is that we are unconsciously creating everything in our world all the time. We have a mass consciousness agreement with everybody else here about what things look like and whatever, how we kind of move around, and, we've created a world, a mass consciousness. But outside of that mass consciousness world, everybody has their own unique unconscious reality. And you talked about some of those creators of that unconscious reality at the beginning. Our place in our family circumstances and experiences, the culture we live in, the education system we're in, all of these things, the traumas that happen to us, the joys, the successes, the failures, everything uniquely shapes and carves every single being on the planet into their own unique style of creating universes. And when people get the most angry at each other is when their particular perception of how things are, their own universe, is kind of threatened by another person's behavior or words or opinions or whatever. And anger is one of, that causes extreme anger, a lot of upset, because that universe that we each have created, until we recognize very, very completely that it is our own unique world, and everybody has their own unique universe that they live in and think in and act in, we are very much at the mercy of other people's beliefs and the contradictions about that. And that's something that our whole education system has not done us any favors with. We are so taught to be sheep.
Well, yeah, that's right. And to fit in, if you're ever going to succeed in this world, you're going to have to learn to sit in that little tiny box right there and look just like every other little box. And
else people are taught to be, people have different relationships with reality, and there's some archetypal roles. There's the rebellious one, there's the heroic one, there's the, the one that upholds it, the one that fights against it, the one that jokes about it, the one that gets lost in it. those are, and the one who, commands and demands that it be a certain way. Those are very archetypal roles that get set up within families and cultures, and people fall into different roles with that. But once we start blurring the lines between those roles and we start taking on the skills and qualities of all of the archetypes, that's when we kind of magically can have at our disposal all the skills that are necessary from all the different archetypes. That's when we can really magically start to create consciously what we want, because it is a kind of a magic. It's magic because we don't actually recognize it as being an actual way that the universe works. So it seems magical, but it also has some very practical applications, some practical ways to work with it. And affirmations are a very advanced way to work with it. And as such, they require practice and they require knowledge, and they also require us to be able to step out of our human understanding of how things work here and start to try to look at it from the point of view of what we came here to do in a big sense, and how divinity sees us, how we are seen from the realm where things are not in physical form, which is what we truly are, our spiritual self, the energetic self that we have. When we can start to understand what's going on from that point of view, then we're much more successful in conscious creation of our world.
And with the changes that have happened on the planet that many people are aware of, either consciously or not consciously, but it's happened, the vibration has raised, that we have more access to our spiritual selves, our magical selves, that more help, more. The veil is thinner. If they're actually, in some cases, I believe they're saying the veil is no more. So, with all of that, is that part of the reason why we're more aware now? We're more consciously aware that we are creating our realities, and that does it make it easier? Is it happening more? Like, what do you see?
This is not from chance. This is a very well planned outpicturing of a dynamic system. And this is a time on the planet where we have come to the meeting of many cycles and coming together of many historical, let's say trans-historical cycles that are all about bringing us to this place where we move into a different way of being on the planet. In fact, at an energetic sense, things are so much different now than they were 2 years ago. You can hardly explain how different they are, and that's neither here nor there. It's just a tilting of the balance in a different way that's going to shoot us into a world that is much more available to our creativeness. However, with every change like with that, there comes a huge responsibility and a maturing that helps us get ready to handle the responsibility for that. So to say it's one thing or another, okay, this has come to us and we have to get used to it. We're opening up to it, or a lot of people are awakening. No, it's not one thing or another. There's many things. The vibration is raising. People are waking up. We're the place in the galaxy as a physical being. Everything is working together in a very powerful unfolding of this right time for people to actually have this experience. And every experiment that's ever been created has these turning points where, the experiment gets pointed in a certain direction towards, hopefully, a major discovery. Okay? And that's what we're in.
And we are going to leave it there for this second portion of Conscious Creation with Debbie Colleen on Go Deep or Go Home. I hope you've enjoyed it. The third part you can look for on YouTube, and you can follow along with us. Check out the show page on letsgetrealchatwithcatherine.com, lgrcc.com for more shows and more Go Deep or Go Home. Wasn't that amazing? Thank you to my guests for sharing with us today. Thank you for watching. Feel free to share the link. You can join us for live shows by going to letsgetrealchatwithcatherine.com and listen to the replays from the show page, preview guests, and explore links to our Facebook fan page, WordPress blog, and more. We are creating an exquisite world. Until next time, take care.